You are tuned into 92.7 megahertz, and it is Conversation Time with Maxine Changa, right here on Revival FM SA.
All right, so we are now live here, and she's with me in the studio. She's not new to the airwaves. Advocate, good day, and welcome to Revival FM SA once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you two know each other.
Yes.
Yes, ons kom 'n lang pad. Jare nou nie. Ja.
And there's someone who accompanied you. Ma'am, just want to just come and greet the listeners. Net hallo sê vir die luisteraars by die huis. Laat hulle hoor wie's met ons.
Goeiemiddag. Postel van Sail.
There we go.
Hi, my hubby. Ek wil so kyk sonder my vir 'n paar minute. God bless you all.
En u en Nadine ken ook mekaar. En ek het nie geweet wat gaan nie. So God doesn't make mistakes. Advocate, this thing of discrimination against women. Kom ons gou induif in die dinge. It's something really that disturbs us. It's not good for humanity. You know, in this show we deal with issues of humanity and also faith-based topics, but this one might not necessarily be faith-based, but it touches humanity. The gospel is about people, by the way. Someone once said, if the gospel was a company like Toyota, you won't expect to buy groceries at Toyota. You're going to expect to buy cars. You get my point? So the gospel will then trade with people, because people are the core of the gospel. And you and I are the people. And so that is where it comes from. And we're touching on something that has to do with a certain group of people in humanity who are going through all these things. Did I allow to greet the listeners at home?
No, she just greeted us.
Okay, maybe I can allow to greet the listeners at home. Where's the gentleman in me now? Sorry for that one.
Good afternoon to all of the listeners, everyone that is live today, that is online or listening, sitting by the radio. We welcome you into the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. If a lay person who does not have any idea what the word, for example, discrimination, what it means, how would you explain to such a person, just to try to paint a picture for the person? Because I don't think all the people are maybe people who use the words on a daily basis. So now you know, just to try to break it down to that effect.
If I can put it in plain terms, discrimination is when the playing field is not equal. We're not on the same level. Or someone wants to push you down. We've heard of the puller down syndrome.
Sure.
You know, one can look at that, even if you can use an example about discrimination. You could be discriminated against because of your color, because of your sex, because you're a woman. And if I can give an example, you're higher educated than a man, but in the workplace, the man is your boss. He gets the biggest salary, but you do the work. That's also discrimination. And in the house, if the wife wants to go and study and the man says, you will keep the pots going and you need to clean the house and you need to look after the children, you can't get an education. That is also discrimination.
Sure. Prof, you wanna, from time to time kan mos maar.
Nee, ek sal inkom, nie worry nie. No, ek sal inkom. Ek gaan jou nie alleen los, my broer.
Okay, wanneer seker maar.
Ons is nog saam. Ons is nog saam.
Okay, chip somewhere in, so chip in. There we go. So now, earlier on I told Prof Romy of air that there's another burning issue. That in South Africa, it's a national thing that's happening. Our national teams, soccer national teams, where we've seen how Banyana, maybe we can use that as an example, maybe also. What you touch base now, as you mentioned, the difference between
fields.
Yeah, the playing fields. Why do they have now to fight, for them to be paid a certain fee? And they all playing for other maybe, because let me say, you would come in better than. Are there certain circumstances that maybe could justify as to why Bafana get more pay than Banyana, but they all play for the same national team?
It boils down to the same thing, even in cricket. It's the same thing. Women are playing cricket. They're not getting salaries. Women come from work, go to the field, play, go home. Some must get a lift with someone to get to the field.
Sure.
And it's a case of men are still being they still have the upper hand, and women are still being prejudiced. Because the question I asked locally, even for cricket locally, I said to them, why are women not getting paid that are playing cricket? And the same goes for Banyana. If you look at Bafana, you cannot even compare. The women are doing better than the men, even in cricket. At this stage, the women are busy rising. But it's still this patriarchal thing about a woman is downtrodden. She, even though she can play as well as a man, if I can use it in the sense of if a team plays and they win a match, why should they not be treated equally? It goes back to Section 9 of the Constitution. Equality. What about equality? What about women having equal rights to men? I read an interesting article yesterday about the fact that 9 out of 10 people discriminate against women, have biases against women. Women are seen as a weaker vessel. Even though without women, we cannot run a country, no matter what who says. It's the women that are running the soup kitchens. It's the women that are raising the children, running the creches, cleaning the churches. Is it not? It's the women that will take her last pension or her last money to help feed the community, to start the soup kitchen. There are women in Colville, for example. Amy is one of them. She runs a soup kitchen. She uses a SASSA grant to run the soup kitchen. How many women are willing to take their SASSA grants to do that?
Sure.
There are grandmothers that are raising children so that the daughters can go and get a job. But the other problem we are facing is poverty, which also leads to discrimination and inequality. Looking at SIDA, I do not know if you know what SIDA is, but SIDA works with, they're looking at the empowerment of women and United Nations, where they're speaking about how women are not equal to men. I don't have the stats with me, but I've done up some reading. And so many women are doing jobs and they're not getting paid what they are worth. There is no equal work for equal pay or equal value. If we're looking at our own government currently, how many women can you say are in senior management in government or in the even in the private sector? How many women are getting a salary that's equivalent to a man's salary? It's the same with Banyana and Bafana. Even with cricket as well. It's the same thing. Women will get a budget of 120,000 rand for kit. I'm giving an example. But men will get a budget of 4 million or 3 million. So you cannot even compare the level of discrimination against women that has still not been dealt with on the ground, in the community, in our government. And we still have the problem of the patriarchy, where men think that they are still superior. And because of that, the discrimination is like a cycle that, if I can use an example, I was reading up about child brides as well. And they said it will take 300 years to eradicate the scourge of child brides. 300 years. So for 300 years, children will still become child brides. Just imagine your 12-year or 11-year-old daughter becomes a wife to a man of 30 or 40 years old. What are we doing about it? The other issue that goes with that, it just basically steers off from that, is in terms of the law, statutory rape is when a woman gets raped and she's under the age of 16.
Okay.
But what happens to a child bride that is 11 and 12 years old? Where do we draw the line between statutory rape and what tradition allows? So that's a question that I leave with the audience.
You want to come in there?
Yeah, I think that's a real life thing that is happening, and I think that we just ignore under the banner of culture or tradition, and we don't see anything wrong, or we feel rather to keep silent about many of these things. And I think, like we said earlier, especially amongst from the side of the church, are we truly our brother's keeper? because many things we are just quiet about. It's not that we don't know these things, it's not that we don't see these things, but we opt to keep silent. And the question is,
sorry for that.
what did Christ do?
Yeah,
and that is what we must ask ourselves, what would he do? And many of the things today, I believe the same, like on the language issue I shared with. There are things, whether post-apartheid, whether pre-apartheid, as a nation where we did abominations before God Almighty. And we have not repented from those things. Even though we might be in a democratic country, if we don't repent from those things, they will still visit us. They will still want us.
Sure.
And there are some things we can't ignore, and that's where we have to come in, because they will be passed on from. It's not like pre-apartheid there wasn't child marriages. It's been there. It's been there. But how do we deal with these things? And as a church in particular, my challenge is for the church.
I hear you.
We have the answers, but what are we doing?
Yeah. Advocate, let's take brutal cases. What is the worst case of unfair discrimination? Because it's very important to distinguish between, because there is fair discrimination, which could have is justifiable grounds or reasons, and there is also unfair discrimination. What is the worst case that you ever witnessed, whether you worked on it personally or something you heard about, you read about, but you were exposed to, a worst case scenario of unfair discrimination towards women?
If I can use an example, I cannot mention names, but there's a colleague of mine that was working for a certain department, and she was doing work for 2 years at a deputy director level and AD level. But she did not even get an acting allowance. And then she started her master's degree, which she finished a year ago. And it was still a case of her colleague had gone to Australia for 2 years to go and study. And she had to do her work and the colleague's work without getting any acting allowances, doing two people's work. And I'm going to be blunt, in government it's a normal thing for a woman, I'm saying now women, because it's Women's Month, to be subjected to that type of abuse, because it is abuse, it is economic abuse. Because if the deputy director, while the deputy director was overseas getting a master's degree, she was still getting a salary every month. And the lady that was doing her work on the lower level was getting her AD salary, not a DD salary, to the extent when the lady came back, completed the degree after 2 years, the situation became such that, okay, you're used to doing this work, now you can just continue, so I will just supervise you. For me, it became woman on woman kind of, even though it was men that are making the decisions for women to go and maybe get an education in another country, like Australia, for example. Government uses Australia quite often. When that woman comes back, or man, in this case a woman came back, the clerk or the official that had been doing the work just had to continue doing what she did.
Sure.
Because it became the norm. So how do we break that mold of that is unfair discrimination? It's also unreasonable to expect one person to do two people's work, where you find people going home 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, coming to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, because the pressure is so much. What the spin off from that is women get caught up in depression, and some suffer from stress disorders. Some will call it post-traumatic stress disorder, because what happens when you become overwhelmed with the amount of work that's in front of you, besides the work that you have in the workplace, what about going home? When you go home, you have your family to take care of.
Sure.
So it doesn't stop there. And the women that work in the community over and above, working at work and at home. So for women out there, it's time to, it's like they say, break the silence, in the same way that, remember years ago they used to put the silver duct tape over the mouth of the woman to say, the women are speaking out about rape. The same thing in the workplace. It's the same thing that's happening now. Because if a woman, if you educate one woman at a time. There's a saying, you educate a nation. Because a woman doesn't keep her knowledge to herself. She will share that knowledge with the community. She will uplift. She will build. She will take her time to assist others to become something in life. If I can use an example of a teacher, let me use a teacher as an example. The teacher goes to the classroom every day, sitting with all those students in there. From those students, we're going to have lawyers, advocates, pilots, nurses, doctors, laborers. We're going to have tradesmen. From one person standing in the front of a classroom, how many of the teachers get told twice a year, have an event to celebrate them? You're doing a good job. You are busy raising the fiber of our next generation. You are setting the trend for the next generation, because without teachers, I'm just giving an example.
Sure.
Without teachers, are you going to have artisans? Are you going to have lawyers, doctors? It starts right down at the basics, from grade R. Without teachers, for example, how are we going to raise academics? It starts there in the classroom, when that little child was sitting there on the floor, coloring in or cutting or counting. And it takes that teacher that raises that child in the classroom to become a success one day. They're adding to the success of our future governments as well. So that is my take on, just as an example,
Sure.
what a woman can do. Now that woman goes from the workplace, the teacher, she goes home, then she's somebody's wife and a mother. So the day doesn't end there. So women wear many caps. They don't just wear one cap. And the time, my mom also always said to me that a woman is like a coal train. You throw the coals in and the train will run. And the only time the train stops is when the coal is finished.
Okay.
Okay. that one straight to the point.
Yeah.
You want to come in?
Now I've got a question for Advocate. How do we help the girl child to sort of escape what we still experience in our time? How do we empower them? How do we create that awareness, for them to stand as individuals, and how do they protect themselves?
Yeah, I think if we're looking at the girl child, the first thing that we need to look at is, can the child protect herself in terms of self-defense? We don't speak about it.
Yes.
Can the mother protect herself in terms of self-defense? Most of the time the answer is no. So I think if we can start in our communities where we empower, or we get someone that can assist, firstly, girls and women and mothers to protect themselves through self-defense, it is a starting point. Because when a woman is being raped by a husband, or gang raped, or being raped by a family member, or being raped by a stranger, what is the first thing that, if she did self-defense, she would have been able to help herself? But if she's held down and she doesn't know how to get out of that grip, she's going to get raped. So I think the starting point is, maybe we need to rethink how our communities have been put together.
True.
The other thing that I've witnessed is, sometimes when mothers go through divorce, they can get a boyfriend, and then the boyfriend ends up raping the child.
That most often happens, yes.
And how do you protect your child? What if you do not know it's happening? But there are mothers who are aware that their children are being raped, and then they're living with someone, because poverty also comes in. I'm unemployed, or I'm not skilled, I'm not trained in anything, I cannot work outside of the house. I'm a housewife. I was a housewife, and I'm still a housewife. And maybe there is not someone in the community that is assisting with skills upliftment or skills development. So it could be, but it's not only in houses where there's poverty. Rape takes place anywhere, anytime. And it's not just linked to one color.
Yes.
It is across the board. And rape has gone to the extent it's not only girls anymore, it's also boys. So to draw the line, we need strong men and women we need the communities to come to raise up again the Ubuntu villages, where they said it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to raise a family too. And if the churches, the mosques, the different religious organizations can come together and take hands and decide not in our name. We will not allow abuse in our name. Because abuse is not a religious thing. It's something that everybody faces. And some people face it on a daily basis to the extent where being in abusive situation becomes normal.
Yeah. And it being August month, before we started, you said what the Lord has laid on your heart is to talk about rape in marriages. Why that today?
Today, when I was sitting, I'm also at a conference. I have to speak on gender-based violence and domestic violence, and the Lord just said to me, I need to speak about rape. And God knows why He does what He does. Rape happens in marriage as well. Rape happens in cases where fathers will molest their own children. I'm sitting with a case currently, which I also cannot say names, where a father started to tamper with his daughter, biting her on the butt, on the arms, on the leg, on the stomach, on the arms, wherever he could bite her. Because the parents are divorced and the child goes to the one parent who lives outside in another city. So the mother's in one city, the father's in another city. Teenage girl. So when the daughter goes to visit with the dad is busy watching pornography on the big screen. So those are things that we found out later on. And to the extent where when the child came from one of the visits from the dad, her behavior started to change. And then the mother picked up that the child is not smiling anymore, she's not laughing anymore. She said she's afraid of the father. I don't want to go to my dad anymore. And upon closer investigation, it transpired that the daughter, we do not know how far the grooming has gone, because we refer to it as grooming. But it starts with fingering, it starts with biting.
Sure.
You know, so we do not know to what extent it went. The case is still sub judice, so we're not sure what actually happened. Did the father actually rape the child, physically penetrate? You know, so we don't know yet. The matter is still pending, and at this stage, the sad part is now the father gets a lawyer to want to defend the fact that he wants access to his daughter. So how do we protect our daughters and our children? It's time for us to stand up. As mothers, not just as lawyers or advocates, as mothers, as a community. We have to stand up, and men as well. There are good men out there.
Sure.
We need to get the men to come alongside us as well. And these men that are doing these things, there needs to be a sex register that is going to be a sex register to say that this person's name is on there. I know in America they've got a village where they put pedophiles, and they put people in a certain village that molest minor children. Now just imagine, it's not even a stranger, it's your own father that is tampering with you. Because while the mother was married to the father used to rape the mother regularly in front of the minor children. So how are the women protected? And they don't speak out, because what are the people going to say? I think you know my book, my poetry book. What are the people going to say? If they know that my husband is sodomizing me, raping me, forcing lured acts to happen, and if I don't, he keeps a knife to my throat, or he takes the gun out. In some cases, the gun is out, the knife is out. If you don't do what I say, I will take your life, or I'll take the life of our child. Those are the realities that women and mothers are facing.
Advocate, I'm thinking, the gentleman in me from time to time, I don't know, does it disappear, what happens, but he would just take a break and come back again. Like now, I interrupted the lady from now. So, for you now again, I asked you earlier on, the layman. You know, I'm always having the layman in my mind. How would you then try to define or explain or make it easy for someone to understand maybe the act could be happening in someone who's listening and they don't know maybe that it's rape. How would you put it plain and simple for someone actually? What is rape?
Rape is when somebody violates your rights, your human rights, your human dignity, in the fact that if you say no, when there is physical penetration, and sometimes rape is not even the physical act, it's the touching, it's the grooming part where someone might touch your body, but in places that is not normal, if I can call it that.
I heard you talk about no. So the person must at least express
Yes, say
the
no.
fact that I don't like what you're doing.
Yes.
The expression part must be there for you to say, but I said you went against my will or against whatever. I don't know.
Yes.
You would want to put it better there.
It is about when I say no, my no is not yes, because you find in many cases men will say the no meant yes.
Okay.
I'm speaking now about present cases.
Okay.
Where she said no, but she actually meant yes. And sometimes the act can even happen within the confines of a safe space like your home, or it can be at a aunt's house, or it can be even in the workplace. It can be anywhere. It depends also. If I can go back even to Joyce Myers. Joyce Myers said her father used to rape her. He used to put her in his car and drive her to some spot, deserted spot, and rape her, and then drive back home again. If I can use her as an example. So rape doesn't just take place in shall you put it, in a bedroom. It could be anywhere. But when someone has experienced rape or attempted rape, you have to find someone in the community that you can trust. If it's a girlfriend, if it's a teacher, if you can go to the school, if you can go to the church or the mosque or wherever they are. Or if there's some lady in the community or someone in the community, even if it's a male, that is maybe what people will refer to as an icon in the community that's doing work for the community.
Yes.
You can knock on a door, or go to the police station, go to the hospital, the neighbor, or tell someone that you trust. This is happening.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I do not see why children have to be raped for years and years and years, and nobody's doing anything about it, and it's going on. There was a case, I forgot, last year when we had the provincial summit, the GBV summit, there was a case of outside Kimberley of an uncle that was raping the children. That I don't know how far that case is, but it started with the one girl when she was very young. I think at the age of 5 or 6, the rape started, and then the uncle continued to rape other children also in the family. But it's close to Kimberley. It's outside of Kimberley. I don't know what's happened to that case. The sad part is, what about the counselling? How do you overcome that? Because now the one is raped, and then the one tells the other one, but uncle touched me, and uncle did things to me, and it hurt, and it was painful. Now, several children in this one family have been raped by the same uncle, but that case is still sub judice as well. So how do we protect the children? The other problem it contributes is alcohol abuse. When people are intoxicated, they will do things. I'm not saying it's an excuse, but we know the Northern Cape has got a fuss problem. Children are even born with fetal alcohol syndrome.
Sure.
But when it comes to rape, the use of drugs comes in as well. Because if somebody's high, they will do whatever they want to. If they're intoxicated, some become very violent, and they will do whatever they want to. And the sad part is sometimes our community members are aware that there's rape happening or there's abuse. They'll hear the screams and the cries, but I don't want to get involved. Where I come from, in the Eastern Cape, I come from Ubuntu. If a child had to be hurt by a man in the community, all those women will get up. They would go and they would make sure that it doesn't happen again. You know, the community would come and they would find a solution to that problem.
Sure.
But that was when I was growing up as a child. Because I was raised in a Ubuntu village, but I'm in the Northern Cape. I've been here for many years now.
Hmm.
And I've not seen that same passion that the people have here.
I hear you.
Because when I just got to Kimberley in 1990, a 16-year-old girl was raped by 2 guys. That was on Christmas Day. I'll never forget. And she ran in by my aunt's house, and when I said to the family, I cannot leave this girl to her own devices.
Yeah.
She was so traumatized. I had to go to the police station with her. I had to go with her to the hospital. We tried calling the family. Everybody was drunk. You know, so I spent a whole day
Sure.
with a young girl, an innocent young girl, that was violated. Her purity was taken in seconds. And people, she said, people watched while she screamed. They watched and nobody came to help her.
And advocate, sorry for interrupting you once again. The worst part is this is a reported case or it was witnessed. What about the possible cases happening behind the scenes when no one sees what's happening, where these victims suffer in silence?
You know what happens most of the time? And I'm going to go back to most women, not all women. Many women are unemployed, housewives. The man is the main breadwinner.
Okay.
And even if there is abuse and rape taking place, he'll tell her, ek sit die brood op die tafel. You'll do what I say. Many women don't have somewhere else to go. Where do they go to? If they're being raped at home, and it's like become a norm, and they're silent about it, because they don't even tell the church people. In some cases, it could be a pastor's wife that is subjected to rape. How does the pastor's wife tell the people in the community, my husband is raping me after the service or whenever, at night, or in the morning before we come to church? I've dealt with cases like that.
Sure.
So where do we draw the line? What happens is women, they call it the Stockholm Syndrome, where women become accustomed to the abuse. To the extent where somebody made a joke about it last night, and I said it's not funny. They said where one woman would even slap her husband so that he can beat her, because if he didn't beat her for the week, she wouldn't feel like the week is complete.
Oh my word.
She became accustomed to being beaten. And if he doesn't beat the love in, if he doesn't beat her, it means he doesn't love her. And that is not right.
Sure.
Because we're made in God's image. Can you imagine you come home from work, walking by the door, and the first thing is the husband's fist that meets your face? That's what some women face.
Sure.
And leading to rape, either in the presence of the children or in the bedroom. And sometimes, because the women goes to the family, she might go to the family and they say, Nekkers, I'm tired of your stories. Like say in Afrikaans, ek nou moeg jy praat elke keer dieselfde ding oor en oor. Los die man. But if a woman is impoverished, if she doesn't have the means to go live on her own,
Sure.
and there are children involved, and there's children, maybe say for argument's sake she's got 4 children, where does she go to? Who's going to support her? Because what happens when women separate from their husbands, many times the men don't pay maintenance. So who's going to take care of the woman and the children? Then women stay. Years ago there was a case of a lady. A magistrate sat with a file on her desk for domestic violence.
Yeah.
After 1 year, the file landed on her desk. And she looked at the file, and everybody in the community knew this husband was abusing the wife. To the extent she took out the interdict against the husband. It was finally granted after 1 year. And a few days later, they found a corpse. The husband killed her when the interdict was finalized. What was his reasoning? I will show you who's the boss. I will show you. To the extent where there was another case where a father killed the mother in front of the son and buried her in front of the shanty. And the child, after 2 weeks, could not live with what had happened to his mother.
The trauma.
Went to the police, and then they dug up the grave there in front of the shanty and found the body of the mother buried in front of the shack. So it's a very heavy topic, but it's a reality out there.
How do we change this reality?
Yeah.
we have to change it by mobilizing our community, our CDWs, I don't know if you know, our community development workers, our NPOs, our NGOs, the Commission for Gender Equality. I am currently involved with the collaboration of the NGOs, the NPCs, the CDWs, with the CGE, and also with Office of the Premier, where we're looking at gender-based violence and we're looking at domestic violence. But ultimately, the community has to mobilize. Who is closest to you? It's the community. So each community has to basically find people that are willing to be mobilized to make sure that we can find a way to end it, because it's not going to end overnight. It's going on for a long time. But if we can, and starting education awareness where we can make people aware.
Yeah.
People, I'm willing to go out as well and speak to the community and tell them, you know, if this happens, this is what can happen. But we need to partner with SUBS, we need to partner with the Commission for Gender Equality, we need to partner with the community stakeholders in order to try to find a solution to this problem. I'm saying try to find a solution because you must know most of the cases that happen will happen after midnight or after 10 at night, from 10 till 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. That is, it could be other hours too. But when trauma hits anyone, it's normally after those hours. But we also need safe houses. I don't know. In the olden days, we used to call it safe houses, where you could run to if there's a problem. You could go to Auntie Sarah's house at 2 o'clock in the morning if you were threatened. And going back, there was a case a few days ago in Butterworth in the Eastern Cape. I do not know the merits of the case, but I've read up on the case where a mother killed herself and her children.
Sure.
It happened, she poisoned the two, and then she stabbed the eldest daughter in the neck, one fatal shot. She stabbed her to death. And people were aware in the community. There's time to when there's starvation in the house, there's poverty. The mother's unemployed. So the mother took her life and the life of her 3 children a week ago in the Eastern Cape. But my question is, if someone in the community knew, and this woman never complained apparently, she didn't want people to know about the situation. But it's time to take off, like they say, the duct tape, in the same way that the women had to do with the rape, and say, I cannot handle this, because with the poverty comes in the mental state, emotional state becomes affected as well. Because if my kids are hungry and I cannot put food on the table, what am I going to do? And how many single mothers are out there that are facing that same challenge? I don't have a skill. I don't work. Ek werk nie, ek is by die huis. Daar's nie kos op die tafel nie. How am I going to feed my children? The social grants they're getting might not even be sufficient, because remember, there's school fees, there's water and lights. We have to live. And if we have fathers that are not maintaining, that are not paying maintenance, because imagine if you have 3 kids and you're a single parent and the father doesn't maintain the children. That is the other issue. Where's the responsibility of the fathers? To be able to curtail this problem?
Yeah.
Well, a listener comes through there. The listener writes the following: a nationwide program is needed with the objective to instill a sense of respect within men for a woman's body.
Yes. True. It is so true, because when I grew up as a child, in those days, they used to say, when you get married, you become the man's property, and he can do whatever he wants to with you. But the respect in the marriage, and I always say, I'm an emancipated woman who is also a survivor. And one thing that I've learned is that there must be equality in a relationship. But we still have, shall we say, people that have the mindset of, when you come into the house, like the latest case I'm working with, it's a lady that was brutally beaten by her husband in this year. And he told her she's not allowed to visit her girlfriends or the family. She must stay at home. But he said he can go wherever he wants to. And on New Year's Day, when she went to go visit the girlfriend, when he wasn't at home, he actually got transport and went to the place where she was and beat her so that she landed up in hospital.
Sure.
Because she's not allowed to leave the house. So we need this mindset of men to change as well. We need men to come alongside the men. And we need the communities, the community builders. We need men to come alongside the men. And if the man has a problem and they've identified it in the community, because I think by the time that you're living 1 or 2 years in a community, people will know, okay, this house is very noisy, that house is quiet. They will know by now. Every Friday when he gets pay or every fourth night and he has a little bit too much to drink, dan is hy weer oproerig, then things, from Monday to Sunday, it's a nightmare for the wife and the children. What is the community? The community needs to do something about it. It's no use. Somebody said the one day, a woman is responsible for getting out of abuse. How? That's a question I would like someone to answer for me. If you're in an abusive relationship and you become conditioned to that abuse, you think it's normal. It's going to take somebody from outside with a different perspective.
I hear you.
I always said I've got a saying. That's my saying. I will drag out my sisters. I'll pull them out. I will do whatever I have to as a woman to get them out of abuse. But they must be willing to leave.
The willingness, on the other hand.
And not
The
withdrawing.
willingness.
And also, there was a case recently of a young girl that is being assaulted by the family members, including the dad. Was at the police station. Takes out the interdict against several family members. But now she must go back into that environment. She's got nowhere else to go. How do we deal with that type of abuse? It's still abuse. So the abuse taking place in the home, even though you can go take out an interdict, you need to be removed from that situation.
From the environment.
You must be taken out. But unfortunately, where do we take our ladies to? Where do we take the children to? Where do we take the young girls to that's being raped by their own fathers, by stepfathers?
Sure.
Where do we take the mothers to that are being raped by their own husbands, boyfriends, family members? We need, this is bigger than us. We need, besides God's intervention, we need a place where women can go. But is there such a place that is not limited? Because I know there are shelters in Kimberley, but the shelters are not capacitated they can only take a certain number of women. What happens to the rest of the women? How many cases, if we must go to SAPS, South African Police Services, and ask them how many cases did you deal with this month of domestic violence? And what was done about it? They'll tell you 1 or 2 went into a shelter. The rest had to go back into that environment. So the cycle continues. So even if you have an interdict, if a wife takes out the interdict against her husband, but she must go live in that same house, now she's got the interdict. That paper's there. If a neighbor doesn't keep a copy of it, it will get torn up. And then the man thinks it's no longer valid. I think I just need to make that clear. If you have an interdict, it's still valid. Keep a copy with a neighbor, with a friend, with a church, with someone. So if you can't help, and in terms of the new law now, there's a new Amendment Act that was passed, the Domestic Bill, to say if you see your neighbor being abused by a family member, spouse, husband, if you witness abuse, you can go and report it now to the police. And you don't need to have an interdict to go and report abuse anymore. That's something that's very important. There's an amendment to the bill, to the Domestic Violence Bill.
Advocate, the one listener came through here, and the question he's posing is, what about combating the pornographic industry? He said because such industries perpetuate the physical and the sexual violation of women.
The question I'm going to ask back, who makes use of those sites? Who is looking at pornography in our communities, in the world, in the country? Mostly men.
That's why he says violation of women. Now, Advocate, let me try to flip the coin a little bit with your permission and the rest of the people in the studio. It's a nice conference and sitting,
Yes.
just need tables there, with something to sip there. It's a nice vibe, and I'm enjoying myself here, being surrounded by such intelligent and wonderful women. What the scripture says, wonderful and fearfully made by God.
Fearfully and wonderful.
Here's the thing. There's currently a case in South Africa of one of the well-known politicians, Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi of the EFF. He's suing Daily Sun. According to him, Daily Sun published something defamatory about him, where a woman who alleged that he was at her place and raped her, and as a result, he comes and indicates that he was never ever addressed. There was a misidentification of himself. So, I want to check with you. Have you maybe witnessed similar cases like those? This is now the one I've seen. You get my point. I don't know how many are out there. Maybe you came across a case whereby women have accused. Let's say at the time, because I heard you describing or defining rape as an incident where it goes against the will of the person, the victim, right? And then in this case, there was consent, or put different, agreement. The person gave permission, and then they engaged in the act, and then for one reason or another, then the person turns, because the grapes were sweet at the time. Now the grapes get sour. You get my point? Now at the souring of the grapes, then the lady then goes and report the matter as rape. But at the time when it happened, it was consent. There was agreement. Everything went well there. But have you maybe also seen such cases? Because it could also maybe put some people innocently who did not commit the act, you get my point, in a disadvantaged position. Those men also, those today could be possibly in jail, behind bars, because it is his word against the person's word who came to allegedly report the matter, and then at the end of the day, whose word is going to be taken, because there was intercourse. And should anything test need to be made, they will show that there was intercourse, yes, but the thing is, she can now say, no, he never, or she never gave consent, or never agreed to this matter. Have you maybe ever been exposed to such cases, maybe?
I only know of this one case where someone was promised a position, a post.
Sure.
And the couple engaged in sexual intercourse. I think they ended up being in a relationship. But when the post was not given to this particular lady,
Yes.
then it was also a cry of rape. Then the consensual act, or there was a promise made of a post, and it developed into something else. But you have to give and whatever. So even though it started out as, okay, in order to get this post, you must sleep with me, because that's what happened a lot in government. But in the one case, it was, I did some digging.
Yes.
The one case I was told, but the people were in a relationship. So when this promised post did
Yes,
not
yes.
materialize,
Sure.
then the lady went to go make a case of rape against this one senior manager. But it goes back to the premise of, if nobody witnessed the act, the physical act taking place between the two parties, then it becomes your word against my word.
Sure.
How do we determine who's telling the truth?
But in most cases, where does the case
In
goes?
most cases,
It goes
it goes that way, yes.
that.
No, in some cases, women are being pressured to give sexual favors, which is also a rape, even though people don't see it as that.
But I mean, the part where
In
now.
the case of, if it was consensual,
Yes.
then it's not rape.
But then the thing is, the story isn't fabricated in such a way that, because like I said, the grapes became sour now.
Yeah.
And now for one reason or another, then the person then goes and, reports a rape case.
If I can use an example, if we go back to the apartheid era,
Yes.
if a mixed couple was caught in the act,
Yes.
what would the white girl's family tell her to say? That the black man raped her.
Sure.
That is going back to the apartheid era. So even in those days, there were incidences where couples were in relationships.
Yes.
And because it was the Immorality Act. They were not allowed to be in relationships. If a family member to walk in on them, busy in the act, then the woman would cry. They would tell her to make a case of rape against the man.
Sure.
If he was of a different color. So it's something that's coming on a long way.
Sure. But there are possibilities. There are
Yes.
men who are in prison
Yes.
because they were allegedly,
They were falsely accused.
falsely accused.
Yes.
As a matter
Because
of fact.
if the DNA cannot prove that, because remember with rape there must be force, coercion. So if I can use a typical example, if someone gets raped, there will be scratch marks, bite marks, or there will be blood, there will be forced penetration, which will also leave marks, or there will be evidence of a struggle. If I can put it that
Is it
way.
always the case?
It's not always the case, because
Sure.
remember this doctor that was injecting the ladies going to his rooms last year. Remember that case? He would inject them, then they would become paralyzed and he would rape
There will
them.
be not a way.
That-
As I'm asking
that
you
case.
to say
So
that
it's not
the
always-
physical signs.
So it might not always show the physical signs, because if it, like the case of the doctor, I think that case was in our court last year, where the doctor was injecting the ladies and then they would become basically paralyzed for that short period of time and he would rape them,
Sure.
and what you do, and they never said that they were raped.
I
So,
hear you.
so how do we, so it's a very thin line.
Yeah,
It's a
because,
very
sorry,
thin
sorry
line.
not to come in there. Prof, I'm looking at the time now. I want her now to give way forward. Right? Let's give solution. We've been talking about the issue. Let us try to come. Where do people go? How do they go about to report at least a rape case
Okay,
for that matter?
To start with, you start at the police station.
Mm-hmm.
Start at the police station, or start at somebody's. Go to someone that is close by, lives close by, that you can trust. If you can't get to police station, if you don't have transport, go to a friend, go to a neighbor, go to the church, or wherever you can find somebody that you can trust, even if it's your teacher. And then from there, the next step is to go to the South Africa Police Services, and they will open up a docket, and then there will be an investigation. But what's important, if a lady or a child has been raped, they must not bath, because they will wash off the evidence.
Sure.
So they first have to go through that examination. The J88 has to be prepared, and they have to collect the DNA and the sperm, and to see if there was any bruising, whatever there was. Take photos of if you were bruised. So that, unfortunately, that procedure it's a very difficult procedure. Can you just imagine someone having been raped and must go now to the police station, go and relive what happened, go to the district surgeon, relive what happened. They must take fingerprints. They must sometimes under the nails. If the person scratched the person, take out the DNA under the skin of the DNA under the nails. If the person scratched that person that was busy raping them, or if there's bruising and marks, photos must be taken. Dockets have to be opened. The case has to go to court. So that part is it's a very cold and clinical process, unfortunately. But to start with, the first point of call will be going to SAPS to go open up the case.
Sure.
And not to withdraw the case. But the problem we're sitting with is, can we trust some of our officials in government?
Sure.
In terms of corruption, cases going missing, dockets going missing. If somebody is well known in the community and this person is a perpetrator, you can buy your way out of a case. You can buy your way out of anything.
Is that how corrupt the system is?
I'm just saying. I'm just mentioning it.
Okay.
Because if you can buy your way out, if you are a well-known, say, a taxi driver, and you pick up girls from school in your taxi and they get raped in your taxi, you can pay an official to make a file disappear. Then if the file disappears, then the prosecutor, the magistrate court will say nolli prosecuti. We can't prosecute. Either there's a lack of evidence, or there's no evidence, or the file is gone. So it's like a pandemic that we're sitting with.
I hear you.
Our president will have to come in as well. Our president. Because it's like have to come from the top down. in order for him, because how do you control what goes on in a police station? Sometimes they're so busy. Everybody's everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you control the processes and make sure that the evidence, but when money changes hands, then there's no justice for the victim.
I hear you. A message came through here. Goeiedag, Brother Maxon en Prof. Romy en ons sprekers in die ateljee. Die goed, okay, my leiers, salut in die ateljee. Ons sprekers van die middaguur. Aan u wil ek hartlik sê, die vroue met die reuse tak. Okay. Dis belangrik dat ons as gemeenskap ook iets doen or uithelp dat ons vinnig maar steeds doeltreffend werk. Keep up the good work, advocate. There's one come from K. Shuping. Dan gaan die boodskap weer aan. Nou nog wag ons as familie vir ons kleinkind Kilebogile Segami wat vermoor is. Wat is die probleem? Those technical things happening right there. You know.
Yes.
Yeah. So now you said the first place to start is a police station for a person who now really
that has been violated.
And
then from there they must take them to the district surgeon or to the hospital. And after they've got the J88 in the evidence, and then the file must be investigated by the investigating officer.
Yes.
And then it goes to the court, to the prosecutor, who must decide is this a prima facie case. Once they've determined it's the case, there's merits, because they also look at the merits.
Sure.
If there's merits for the case, then they will proceed to court.
All right.
But remember, cases are defended. So the opposing party also has the right to legal representation. And sometimes money can buy your way out of anything. I'm just saying.
On the other hand, there was also something, Prof. There was an article I also read about a lawyer who then mentioned that he is going to now stop representing perpetrators of rape in court because he is feeling that he is perpetuating the act, because it sounded as if, I cannot speculate, that there were cases that on technical basis,
Yes.
you get my point, that the case was won, if I can use those words,
Yes.
but it does not change the fact that the act took place. So those are type of things that we look at, but we're going to be topics for another day. But for you today, for coming through, thank you so much. I don't know, Prof, is there something from your side?
Yeah,
maybe
no, I
in
just
closure?
wanted to check in terms of the process for those listening out there. When they do go to the hospital after the case has been opened, do they also have to go and sit in a line, or is it still that whole process? So you sit there as a rape victim and you have to wait your turn.
Yes.
Traumatized as you are.
So we need
And,
we need our Department of Health to come alongside us, like you have at SAP's victim room. We need a special unit
At the hospital.
at your hospital just to deal with the rape cases. You know, because there's a triage process. People have to go through to see are you red, green, or you know, to see how serious your condition is. So our state hospitals will have to up their game. They'll have to have, even if it's one section or one wing of the hospital that is dedicated. My solution is, that's my view or my thoughts, is for us to start a whole center where there can be counselors, lawyers, nurses, doctors, where people could be
Gospel
on call.
ministers as well. Yes.
Ministers, you can have people from different religions, for depending on the victim or the
Yes.
type of victim that you are getting.
Yes.
Where we can have a center where we can deal with these issues, but that will be a center on its own.
Yes.
You know, where you can have like I'm currently doing a lot of mediation where one can mediate matters as well and get it quicker through the courts instead of that long processes, because remember the court rolls are very full. So my solution or suggestion is if we can have one center where we can deal with these things, like almost like a rape crisis center, I
Sure.
can call it that.
Yeah.
But it will have to come from presidency.
Sure.
Down.
Advocate, I think we covered a lot today, and it was once again good to have you. You know the drill by now. You say after me, Revival FMSA,
Revival FM SA,
92.7 megahertz.
92.7 megahertz.
Phambili,
Phambili,
noma kanjani.
noma kanjani.
Forward no matter what.
Forward
That's
no
it
matter
says.
what.
Yes, that's what it normally says.
Kenako.
Kinako, it's time.
Style.
Yeah. So yeah, that is how we come to. And Advocate, thank you very much once again, and hoping to host you, God willing. We don't decide what happens. I never thought she would be here today. She never thought even herself would be here today. But here we are. What is the song saying by our sister Puleng Mach? Ke laolwa ke moya.
Amen.
The spirit controls. Revival FM SA is a Christian radio station whereby the vision is that we create an atmosphere for the manifestation of the kingdom of God. So it tells you a lot. But thank you for coming through once again. Till we meet again, God willing. Okay. That is how we come to the end of that one there with Advocate Ekam. She spoke a lot about issues of things happening in our country against women. And so a lot of us said, and some at some point can maybe just, relate. And we think of those families who their family members might have died brutally at the hands of perpetrators. The intention was not to open wounds, but rather to talk about this and educate our people out there, because things happen in such a way that sometimes is beyond our human control, that we really need to say, but where can I go to need help? And unless we are able to get pointing out where are we going, then people suffer in silence. And if the victim don't speak up, the perpetrators continue with the same act. But Revival FM SA, we allow people to come and talk about these things. We are thankful. 7 minutes after 5 o'clock we are right now. Till we meet again, Advocate. But we're going to continue right here with the program, The Roundtable. We are now 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. And we're going to have possibly some other guests coming in, a group of women. They are prayer warriors. They might be coming in anytime from now. So from me, Maxine Changa, I'm just going to go around the corner. And when we come back, we continue with the program station because much more is coming up.